What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial I'm going to show you how to set up semi-automatic, fully automatic, and burst fire firing modes. So for example, if I draw this pistol, it is set up to fire with semi-auto. If I pull out this assault rifle, it is fully automatic, and if I switch to this assault rifle, it has burst fire. Now this tutorial is slightly different to the previous version of this tutorial. It is slightly improved and it is set up to work with my most recent weapon system tutorial. So if you haven't seen that tutorial already, I highly recommend you check it out because this is built off of the top of that. So without further ado guys, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, I'm here in my project and all I've done is I've created a new weapon type called a burst rifle. So I've created a new weapon blueprint and pickup blueprint, and I've created a weapon type called burst rifle, and then I've got my other assault rifle, which is just of the original weapon type assault rifle. You don't have to set it up this way. I've just set it up this way so that I've got a separate type of assault rifle that looks, slightly different and is going to be set up as a burst rifle so that I can test my burst fire logic. So if you want to see what that looks like, if I go to my project folder and props and weapons and I open up my enum weapon type right here, you can see I've just added another weapon type called burst rifle, and I've created this assault rifle B blueprint class, which has the type where is it? Burst rifle here, weapon type. But apart from that, nothing else has been changed. And as I said, you don't have to do it this way. This is just so I've got a sort of cleaner way of testing my full auto fire and my burst fire logic. And on that note, what we're going to do is open up our enum fire mode. And this should have any types of fire modes you want to have on your weapons. We might add a shotgun sort of fire mode to this later on. But for now, we are just going to have semi-auto, full auto, and burst fire. So this enumeration will contain all of the enumerators of the different fire modes that you want to have in your game. We're going to save that and close that. And then I'm going to open up my BP Weapon Master and make sure that this enumeration is added to these weapon blueprints. So open up BP Weapon Master and I'm going to add a new variable. It's going to be fire mode, and this is going to be the enum fire mode that we were just looking at just now. While we're here, we can add a couple of other variables. Let's also just duplicate damage because it's a float, and I'm just going to call this one fire rate. And we are also going to duplicate that one, and we're going to have one called burst delay. And this is the delay between bursts on any of your burst fire weapons. And then we can duplicate that once more, and I'm going to call the last one burst shots. And this is how many shots per burst your burst fire weapons will fire. So this is going to be an integer. And while we're here, let's just set some default values for these. Instead of going into each of our weapons and changing these values as part of this tutorial, you're welcome to go on and do that afterwards. But just for now, I'm going to hit compile, and then my fire rate, I'm going to set a default value of 0.2. My burst delay, I'm going to set a default value of 0.3. And my burst shots, I'm just going to set a default value of 3. Compile and save and close that. And now all of these weapons will have those default values, but they will also have the default value of that fire mode enumeration. So we need to just go in and make sure each of these weapons has the correct fire mode. So I'm going to open up Pistols A here, and it should already be on semi-auto, and it is. So I don't need to change that. I'm going to open Assault Rifle B, which is this one over here. This is going to be my burst fire, my burst rifle. So I'm going to change the fire mode to burst fire. Compile, save, and close that. And open up Assault Rifle A and make sure that this one is set to full auto. Compile, save, and close that. And now each of these weapons, the pistols over here, and this assault rifle, and this assault rifle have each of my 3 fire modes. The next thing we want to do before we set up the fire modes is create an enhanced input. So I'm going to go into my inputs folder here, my third person input and input actions right here, and create a new input action. I'm going to call it IA_shoot and open this up. And we can leave the value type as digital boolean. And here on triggers, we're going to add 2 triggers. The first one is going to be pressed, and the second one is going to be released. And I'm also going to drop these down and change the actuation threshold here to 0. Pressed and released with the actuation threshold set to 0 on both. I can save and close that, and then back out to my input folder and open up my IMC default. And I'm going to add one more mapping. I'm going to select the IA shoot that I've just created. I'll drop this down, and I'll click this little keyboard icon and then click the left mouse button to set this to the left mouse button like so. And that's all we need to do in here. We can save this and close this. And now we're going to be looking in our character's blueprint here. So here I've got the basic firing logic that we set up as part of the weapon system. I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to move it down into some empty space down here. And the next thing I'm going to do is collapse some of this into a function. So I'm going to grab all of this stuff on the end here that plays the animation on the weapon and draws a line trace. And I'm going to collapse this to a function. So I'll grab all of this, and I'll just grab one of these reroute nodes like so, and right click and collapse to function. And I'm just going to call this function fire. So this function is going to have everything in it that you want your weapon to do every time that it fires. And I can get rid of these. I only need one input here, the current weapon right here. So I can delete these other inputs that it has generated, and I can call this one. Actually, I can delete all of the inputs, and I will disconnect that. And in here, I will just use this current weapon pure function that I've got here. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. And then I'm just going to plug this into the socket transform for the muzzle and the animation stuff like so. That's a little bit cleaner. And into the range down here like so. Nice. The only other thing I want inside of this fire mode for now is I'm just going to kind of have a dummy function to reduce my ammunition to test that I have some sort of basic ammo functionality working with my fire modes. So what I'm going to do is create a new variable, and I'm just going to call it ammo. This is going to be of type integer. I'm going to compile this, and then I'm going to set the default value of ammo to something like 30. And then I'm going to get my ammo, and I am going to decrement int like so. So we're not going to be setting up an ammo system today. We're doing fire modes today, but this is just a way of testing that we're going to include the condition that we have some ammo into our fire mode, so that if we run out of ammo, for example, in the middle of a burst fire, it won't fire too many times. You'll run out of ammo and the burst fire will stop. So that is all we really need to do there. What we're going to do now is start setting up our fire modes logic. So I'm going to back out to the event graph here, and we're just going to keep this is valid right here. And I'm going to move this can fire up a little bit. We will use this fire function. We're going to call this every time our weapon fires. But actually, I'm going to rename this can fire boolean to can fire again, just to make this a little bit clearer, because we are going to also create a function called can fire. And this is going to be the sort of function you're going to feed any data into, that you want to stop your player from firing, such as the ammo running out. So we'll create that in a moment, but we'll also create another boolean, and it's just going to tell us if we are indeed firing. So I do need to get rid of this left mouse button input and actually find my IA shoot that we created. So I'm going to plug started into here, not triggered, started. And then what we're going to do is create a new variable, and I'm just going to call it is firing. So this is basically a Boolean that's going to tell us if we are pulling the trigger on our weapon, essentially. And this is going to be false by default, obviously, and I'm going to set it to true here, and I'm going to set it to false upon cancellation of this input action. So when we click the left mouse button, this is going to be set to true, and when we release it, it's going to be set back to false. This just tells us if we're trying to fire, essentially. The next thing I want to do is create a new function, and I'm going to call it check can fire. And this is, for now, just going to check if we have any ammunition. So we're going to get our ammo here, and we're going to check that it is greater than 0. Hold B and click to get a branch, plug this in here, and then we're going to get a couple of return nodes. So we'll add a return node, and we'll give this an output, and we'll call it can fire ? And on true, we're going to return true, and on false, we're going to return false, like so. So this is just a very basic sort of placeholder function for now, that as long as our ammunition is greater than 0, then we will be able to fire. And, you know, in our fire function, we just set each time our weapon fires, we're going to decrement ammo by 1. So when this reaches 0, this will return false, and we won't be able to fire. So we're going to call that right here on our firing logic, check can fire. And I'm just going to copy this branch and plug the return into the branch like so. So now we have this very nifty little function, and we can feed some other stuff into this later, you know, to stop our player from firing, essentially. After that, what we want to do is we do want to just check if we can fire or can fire again. And we are going to drag off of our current weapon right here, and we're going to get the fire mode of our weapon. And then we are going to do a switch on enum fire mode. So let's do our semi-automatic fire first, and this is going to be very easy and straightforward. The first thing we need to do every time we fire is set can fire again to false. So while we are firing, we don't want to be able to fire again. This is basically to stop our player from spamming fire and firing faster than they should be able to fire. So we're going to set that to false, then we're going to fire our weapon, and then we are going to delay. The amount of time we're going to delay for is our current weapon's fire rate. So we can get our current weapon and get fire rate. Whoops. Plug this in here. And then after the fire rate of our semi-automatic weapon has elapsed, we want to set can fire again to true. And that is literally all we need to do for semi-automatic fire. We can select this here and press C to comment and call it semi-auto fire. Nice. We won't bother testing this out. This is really, really simple. This will work. We'll test it all out at the end. So let's just move on to our fully automatic fire here. Now, we do want to set can fire again to false as the first thing we want to do. So let's just duplicate this node and plug it into the full auto here. Now this is going to be a little bit more involved, and we're going to use a couple of timers to sort of control our logic here. So I'm going to drag off of here and set timer by event. Whoops. Set timer by event. And I'm actually going to drag off of this return value here and promote it to a variable, and I'm going to call it my full auto timer. So this is just a handle. This allows you to grab this and do stuff like check how much time is remaining, or cancel this timer, clear and invalidate this timer. So we'll promote it to a variable there. And then what we want to do is grab our fire rate. So I can duplicate this current weapon and get fire rate up here. And I'm going to plug this into the time on this event right here. And because we don't want this to delay, what we want to do is negate this value for the initial start delay, because otherwise, if this is 0.2, this will not fire until after 0.2 seconds. So we need to negate that by putting negative 0.2 in here. But to make this scalable, what we can do is drag off of the fire rate here and multiply this by -1. And if we plug this in here, this means that this will not delay at all. And we do indeed want this to loop. So we're going to check looping here. And this is going to basically trigger our weapon to fire every 0.2 seconds, or whatever you've got your fire rate to set to. So what we need to do is create a custom event, and we'll call it auto fire. We can plug this delegate pin into the delegate pin on the auto fire event like so. So this timer is going to fire off this event every 0.2 seconds. And what we want it to do is fire. So we can call our fire function. And then we want it to basically check after each time it fires, we want to check if we're holding the trigger. So we want to check if basically this is firing is true to see if we want it to keep firing. Now this system that I've come up with is not perfect. If you can come up with a better way or a way of improving it, please don't hesitate to let me know. But this is the only way I could figure out to get this to work the way I think it should work, which is that if you release the trigger while the weapon is firing, fully automatic, but then you pull the trigger again, when it's next supposed to fire, it should just continue to fire, right? I hope that I've explained that well enough, but basically this is what I've come up with. So what I'm going to do is grab this set timer by event and these two nodes here. I'm going to duplicate them down here, plug this in here, and actually what I'm going to do with the fire rate here is just make this timer slightly shorter than my fire rate. So I'm going to multiply this by 0.9 and plug this in here, and this will not be looping, and this will have a delay. So we're not going to touch the delay here. So this technically would make it possible for your player to fire slightly faster than than is intended, but they would have to mash the left mouse button at the exact right time, you know, after 0.9 times the fire rate. So it's very, very unlikely to give any player an advantage unless they're using some sort of, macro on a controller or something. But once again, like I said, this is not perfect, but this is the best that I've been able to come up with. And this did take me quite a while to come up with this. I had a lot of debugging. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And if you understand how this is working, maybe you can figure out a way of improving it. So I'm going to create another custom event, and I'm going to call it check stop auto fire. I'm going to plug in the delegate here, and that's what this timer is going to be doing. It's going to be checking if we should stop firing. And what it's going to check with is our check can fire function. So we're going to run that. And we are also going to check, so I'm going to drag off of can fire here and get an and boolean. And I'm also going to check is firing. So if we let go of the trigger, I'm going to drag off of here, get a branch, plug this in here, and then on false, what we want to do is clear and invalidate this timer up here, our full auto timer. And I'm also going to put this on a custom event because I want to be able to call it from elsewhere if I want to stop our, our fully automatic weapon from firing. So I'm going to just over here, I'm going to create another custom event. I'm actually going to call this one ceasefire because it's going to cease all of our fire, be it fully automatic or burst fire or whatever. So this is just another thing that you can call if you want to stop your player from firing. And on ceasefire, I'm going to get a sequence. I'm going to create another custom event. I'm going to call it cease auto fire. And what cease auto fire is going to do is clear this timer, so we can grab our full auto timer here and we can clear and invalidate timer by handle. Plug this in here and then plug the 0 as well into here. So basically, I'm going to call this within our auto fire functionality over here, but I've also connected it to this ceasefire event because if you want to call this from elsewhere, it doesn't matter what kind of weapon you'll be carrying, it will cease auto fire and it will also cease burst fire, which we're going to add to here in a moment. So we can call this cease auto fire down here on false. So if we can fire and we are indeed still firing, this will ring true. But if either of these are not true, this will ring false. And we can go ahead and cease auto fire. So we can drag off a false here and cease auto fire. And then we can also set can fire again to true. Nice. And that should all be working. I'm just going to highlight all of this and move it out a little bit. Hit C to comment and call this full auto fire. And I am just going to test this very quickly before we move on to our burst fire logic. So I'm going to compile this and hit play. And I'm going to grab my assault rifle A here, which is set up for full auto. And I might just turn the volume down a little bit, not break my eardrums. This seems to be working as intended. So I can mash fire as fast as I like, and I will not be able to fire any more quickly. But I have only got 30 rounds on that sort of dummy ammo variable that I've created. So I might also just find the R key, R keyboard event, and I'm just going to set ammo to... I'm just going to set it to 10 when I reload, and this will help me test my burst fire in a moment. So now just double check again, grab this. I should not be able to fire this any faster if I mash the trigger, and as long as I'm pressing the trigger and there's ammo, it should continue to fire automatically. So that is working as intended, but do be warned, as I said, this is not perfect, and maybe we can find a way of improving this in the comments section. So let me know if you figure out a way of improving this, but let's go on to do our burst fire. So burst fire is going to be very, very similar to our auto fire. At the beginning here, we can actually grab the timer and the can fire again and all of this stuff here and duplicate it down here. I'm going to plug this into burst fire on my switch right here, and I'm going to promote this to a variable, and I'm going to call it burst fire timer. Nice. And we also want to create a custom event down here and call it burst fire, plug in the delegate on the timer to our burst fire like so. And then we want to find a node called do-n. So if you just type don, it should come up under utilities flow control, do-n. And this allows you to execute this only a certain number of times before you want to reset it. This is very, very handy for our burst fire logic. And what we can do is get our current weapon and get burst shots. And our burst shots is going to plug into the N on the do N. And then on exit, what we want to do is call our fire function. And then after we fire, we want to check if we can fire again. So grab can fire again. Whoops, that's not the one. Check can fire. Check can fire function. So we'll grab that. We will put this output onto a branch. And if we can't fire again, we're going to cease our burst fire. So we'll do that in a moment. Actually, we'll set that up now because we're also going to do that if we have sort of reached the number of burst shots. So we can actually drag off of the counter here and we'll get an equals, and we'll check if this is equal to the number of burst shots. So if the burst shots is 3 and this has executed 3 times, the counter will read 3, and we can put this on a branch up here, plug it into the true, and then if it has reached the number of burst shots, we want to cease our burst fire. So let's create our cease burst fire custom event, just like as we did with the cease auto fire up here. Create a custom event, call it cease burst fire, and this is going to clear and invalidate the timer of our burst fire timer, like so. And we'll plug this into the 1 on that sequence. So as I said, we can call these within the respective logic of each of these fire modes. And if we want to use this later on from elsewhere to stop our character from firing either of these types of weapons or whatever else you want to add onto here, then you can use that. So with cease burst fire created, we can now call it down here. We can just drag off of the true here, cease burst fire. And we also want to duplicate this and plug it into the false right here. So this, if we run out of ammo and we can no longer fire, we want to cease, and we will set can fire again to true here. But up here, we actually want this to have the delay of the burst delay. So this is the delay between bursts. So we can find a delay and we'll get our current weapon and get burst delay. Plug this in here. And after the burst delay, what we want to do is set can fire again to true. And we also want to reset our do n over here. So we can plug the reset execution pin into the end over here and grab some reroute nodes to keep this neat and tidy. Whoops. Nice. And that is pretty much it, I believe. I'm going to highlight all of this, press C to make a comment, and call this burst fire. And now I'm going to hit play and test this out on my burst fire rifle. So I can compile and save and hit play, grab my burst fire assault rifle over here, and that's firing 3 times. And if I mash the left mouse button, it is not able to fire any faster than intended. Now that this has run out of ammo, if I press R, it has set my ammo variable to 10. So this should fire 3 bursts of 3. And it is not. Something has gone wrong here. I do believe it is just because if we run out of ammo and this rings false, we do need to also reset the do n. So we can just plug this into that reroute node like so. I might just make another reroute node here to keep this a little bit neater like so. So we do want this to circle back and reset that do n like so. That should all be working now. So I'm going to press R here and set my ammo to 10, and you should see a print string up the top left. I just put a print string on that to say it's been set to 10, and now I should be able to fire 3 times, and then this 4th time it will only fire once because I have no more ammo. And if I press R to reload again, I am able to do my burst fire again. And just to double check that that fix has worked, we also want to just check that when we use up those 30 rounds, this will stop firing once we've done 10 bursts. And now if I reload and set it to 10, it should be able to fire again. So yes, that was indeed the issue here. We just needed to reset that do end. Otherwise, this would fire, and because it wasn't reset, it just wouldn't execute anything else after that. Nice. So that's all working now, guys, and that's pretty much it. If this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.